Operations Center, contour 290 is all clear.
Cover that.
Richard Serra is one of those artists that needs virtually no introduction. He just was so revolutionary in his thinking about sculpture. One of his most famous early kind of actions was a series of sculptures that were actually verbs. In our collection, we have a work called To Lift. It's a sheet of rubber that he just literally, very simply, lifted up from the middle and stays there in that shape. So it is kind of materialized action that becomes its own sculpture.
It's like a cape. And I don't know how it's standing up.
Something very important to his work is that you have to physically be in the presence of one of his works to be able to fully understand it, to comprehend its scale. It does something to you in a visceral way, and there's no kind of photograph or even a video that can truly replicate that experience.
As you walk interior to its space, it becomes quite obvious that you are the subject. It's disorienting. It dislocates you. You have to find your way through and kind of accept the journey of where you're going. There can be a kind of compression as you're walking through them downward. But once you arrive to the center, that reverses and then they release themselves upward. There's a kind of uplifting to the whole movement. You know, the one thing that we didn't talk about is the way this piece cuts the sky. And that's the big difference between indoors and outdoors. And the way the piece cuts the sky is something that you can't anticipate, and that makes me happy about this piece, actually. That's the whole reason to have it outside.
We're on day one of the install of this new work by Richard Serra called 4 Rounds, Equal Weight, Unequal Measure. There's 2 permanent outdoor works by Richard Serra that are already at Glenstone.
This is Sylvester. It's a piece that was made in 2001.
The piece behind me is called Contour 290. It was installed in 2004.
Richard came and got a sense for what it felt like to navigate the topography.
I was very interested in how this field undulates down.
And he came up with the idea to trace this contour line.
What I wanted the piece to do was to curve its way through, to follow how the land moves.
It's an ambulatory experience. You have to walk around it.
Richard Serra's work, it sort of shifts your perspective physically. He grew up in San Francisco, and he spent a lot of time at the docks. So I think a lot about rusted hulls of massive industrial ships.
Richard Serra described this as though a ship was moving past you in the water and you're moving along it, and you can really feel the weight and the push and the pull.
You view it as you walk from different perspectives, and it changes, and it'll change how you know the landscape.
I see it not just changing the landscape, but really fusing with the landscape. When we first encountered the new piece, we thought, wow, this is so completely different from the Serra that we knew. This is another typology of work in Richard's practice. No longer are you entering the sculpture. You're not following it like a wall. It is both the container and the contained.
Yeah, leave that one on. Take that one off. Coming up.
The challenge of this project was the weight. 80 tons per piece is extremely heavy and very difficult to move. And we're bringing it to a site that doesn't have a real road. A lot of attention had to be given to how we're going to truck them, how we're going to get them from this elevation down to the slab, how we're going to set them. Different types of sculptures, it might be that the pieces are oversized, they might be too wide, too high. But here it was all about weight. I think that's what the sculpture's about too.
With this artwork, you have these 4 varying large-scale cylinders that all weigh the same, 82 tons, but all measured differently. You start to think about well, how do I project weight onto something? Why do I think something weighs a certain amount? Is it because of the way that it looks? Is it because of the scale? Is it because of the room that it's in? Is it because of what's holding it? The artist just sort of is presenting this really kind of simple equation, and yet it's not as simple as it might imply.
Ready, Rava? Good. Want to touch back up? Yeah. Touch it up, upload. Touch more. Stop.
They're moving it into position now. When they have that exact measurement, they'll place it. And then once all of the sculptures are placed and the shipping frames are taken off, they'll finish pouring this wall, and then we'll drop the ceiling in.
Finding a space for these 4 giant steel objects was no small feat. In our discussions with the artist and Tom Pfeiffer, the architect, we thought of housing the work inside a container, because if it was just exposed to the landscape, it would be swallowed up by the enormity of the landscape. You don't get a sense so much of its scale without the frame of a room.
So what do you think the artist is working with here material-wise?
It's like some sort of metal.
Yeah.
It's like a construction material.
Yeah, yeah. So you're right, it is. Richard Serra has this wonderful ability to make work that reminds me very much of the built environment. We are surrounded by the built environment at all times, and we don't really remember that. It's a great reminder. about our lives and how we live. As you're walking through, you are very aware of where your body is in space, and it really greatly affects how we feel.
Oh, it looks like the sun's almost coming out.
Light is nature. What you see is the structure and the light come together to make the architecture. These are the beams here that we made that frame the light. And we did a lot of studies to make sure that this was the proper proportion so that it would give an even light throughout. Nature is not just grass and trees. It's the movement of light, the color of light. When a cloud moves overhead, the order of the day changes. We wanted the poetry of the light to be present in this experience of moving through the art.
When looking at a monumental work of art, the first thing we think of is, can we site it outdoors? We want visitors to really take in the landscapes as well as the sculpture. There's not one without the other. And that's the thing with outdoor sculpture, is that it's dynamic. You think that you erect this giant steel thing and it doesn't ever change, but because the grasses change, because they die away, because trees grow, it changes your experience of the work.
With the Four Rounds Pavilion, because it is a building in the landscape, it gives us an opportunity to try new plants on a bigger scale. As you make your way through and you're going through the landscape and you're like, this is, beautiful and soothing and relaxing. We try to use plants that were from this area. The native plants are on cycle with native insects that have been living together for hundreds and thousands of years. It's such a long-term project, and we want to do it sustainably. Ideally, we get native plants that can then reseed themselves, keep the succession going, and eventually, you're making a big change.
So here's the path. Serra wanted a very particular sequence in choreography to the front door, which is this path right here, which is the boardwalk, as you're moving through the opening and then into the room.
And then you get surprised.
Even by the time you get to this point and you look through, you can't completely see the sculptures. It becomes an unfolding experience.
And you can leave that on, just cut it like that. Yeah, there you go. That'll work.
We did this last summer, last July. And for how many months there was no roof on it. So they were covered in the elements, the sooner we can get the walls off these things and just get a sense is there mold in there? Is there moss? Until you take it off, it's kind of hard to know what's going on in there.
With Richard Serra's Four Rounds, you have a very solid metal sculpture.
There you go.
Something that's made solidly seems very indestructible, but oddly enough, sometimes metals have very sensitive surfaces. We have artworks that are made of a weathering steel. A handprint on that could take years to weather away.
Well, we don't want sculptures to be touched I think there's something really tender about that, like the fact that my hand could affect a sculpture of that's 82 tons made of forged steel.
After a lot of discussion with Richard Serra, we had to find a material that could live with these works. I think there's something wonderfully akin with his work to concrete, that it does have that sense of honesty, that it is handmade, that it does have this sense of permanence and weight to it. Richard wanted that sense of materiality to speak.
My life here is like a nanosecond. If you make some contribution at all, it's very, very hard to predict in terms of perpetuity what's going to last and what's not. Let's just say that this kind of work means that there's a chance.
Thanks everybody for coming out this morning in the rain. Very happy to share with you the newest addition to Glenstone's outdoor program. Richard Serra considers this one piece. It's 4 individual elements, but it's also the space around the elements and the space in between them. And I think it's a beautiful question, where does that sculpture end?
It's sort of like going into a pyramid. Yes. Or one of the tombs there.
I've heard it described like that, like a tomb. Yeah, like in Rome. The crypts and.
That's it, the crypts.
Yeah.
There's a timelessness to Richard's work. I think about Stonehenge. I think about other, ruins from ancient civilizations. We know just intuitively that these heavy, giant steel objects are going to outlive us. They will be around for a long, long time. And it puts into perspective what our legacy is here on Earth.